On the bench today, we have an Apple Macintosh LC, the first budget color Macintosh released by Apple in 1990. It was cheap, so I'm guessing it doesn't work. Now, the Mac LC holds a special place in my heart. The LC was released in late 1990, October of 1990. It was part of 3 new Macs released by Apple. The Mac Classic at the low end, the 2SI at the high end, and in the middle was the first low-cost color Macintosh. It was $2,499 USD, which is insanely expensive at the time, and even expensive now. Now, the reason why it was special to me, at the time we had a Mac 512K Enhanced. I loved that machine, but I really wanted color. I really wanted more than 512K of RAM, and it was the first color Mac that I thought I might be able to convince my parents to get. Turns out, no. However, our school got a couple of them, and I was on it non-stop. Now, fast forward a little bit, and you start to realize it wasn't that great of a machine. It was intentionally hobbled by Apple from the get-go. The 68020 wasn't a bad processor, but Apple kept it on a 16-bit data path, didn't give it away to add an FPU, and artificially limited the RAM to 10 megabytes, even though a bunch of the other machines were able to go much further than that. The LC was also kind of the final nail in the coffin for what might have been the more interesting Apple IIgs. By that point, Apple was ready to completely leave the Apple II series. The Macintosh was the way forward. This was the machine to push into the schools to finally get rid of the Apple II. This Macintosh LC was picked up by a local computer shop, apparently as a sold or recycled item that obviously they couldn't sell anymore because it can't be used for modern whatever. I got it instead. As we can see, the keyboard may be a little questionable, although it seems to type okay. The spacebar is definitely slightly busted. There's a pad missing on the monitor. Everything powers on, though the monitor is clicking, which means we have some work to do. Let's try powering it on. So despite hearing a drive spin up, we have a flashing question mark, which could mean no operating system. That terrible noise in the background, Apple seemed to have a similar problem to Commodore at the time, where SMD was still fairly new, cheap capacitors were used, and so these are likely shot. That sound is likely coming from the speaker. Given how the LC was designed, this could theoretically also affect the SCSI controller, but that's kind of hard to tell right now. Let's pop in a disk, see if it boots. One thing that might be kind of hard to hear is that incredible high-pitched squeal, which may not come through either in my source video here or by the time it gets compressed. But we definitely have some issues with the capacitors. What's interesting though is that we're still getting audio output. So maybe we don't have a leakage problem that bad, but we definitely have some capacitors that could use some help. Well, at least we now know how much RAM we have. And it looks like we have the onboard 2 megabytes of RAM, as this is complaining about needing at least 4 megabytes. So I think it's time to dig in. We definitely have a capacitor problem. We don't seem to have a hard drive. So let's start from there. So these are easy to open. They're a simple case. You just undo these 2 latches. Sometimes there's a screw here, but this one does not. Lifting up the cover, as we can see, there is a very old battery. We do have a SCSI drive connected to the SCSI bus. We have a floppy drive connected. There is no RAM installed, but it does have the standard VRAM installed. We do have all of our ROMs. And, obviously, because it did boot, it's a little dusty, but otherwise it looks good. Even looking over here by the capacitors, there's dust, but there's not really... I'm not seeing a lot of cap juice, which is a good thing, because that means if we do have a cap problem, and we probably do, they haven't exploded everywhere. We don't have any rot from there. If I look at... Let's see here. And our battery holder here. We do have a battery from July of '94. Now I don't know if that is a date of manufacture or a date of expiration, but let's say 7 years and we still are sitting at about 2001. Plus, given that the LC left production in early '94, it seems unlikely that it was replaced, but there we are. So giving a little tour on the board, as I mentioned, there's no SIMs installed. Otherwise, it's a remarkably clean board. And as I mentioned, really no cap juice, just dust. Dusty fan, speaker, original hard drive. Looks really good, honestly. I mean, nothing really to complain about here. I think this is a good opportunity to do something fun with this. So, let's start. We're going to disconnect some devices, and then we're going to pull out the motherboard. So, we've got a floppy here. We have SCSI here. Hard drive power here with a altered Molex connector. And then our main power supply here, which also should just slide right out. Maybe? Possibly? So I'm going to pull out the power supply, and then I'm going to pull this out, and now we're in a much better spot. The LC speaker assembly is kind of weird. It uses pads on the motherboard, and the pads on the motherboard are what provide the electrical connection, which is super weird, kind of cool, but super weird, and I can't see how that would, hold up over time. But here's what is holding up: these latches that are keeping this in here. So how does that work? Here's the obvious latch. I assume it's here. And maybe there's one over here that I can't see. Let's try it. So if we pull the latch here, there's something here. So maybe there's like a latch here and it looks like the same here. Does it go in like this? It might. Nope. There we go. That was needlessly complicated. From this point, with everything taken out, I think the motherboard will just pop right out by removing tabs. Let's take a look here. So if we pull this tab back and pull this tab back, there it is. Should line up with these. Pull right out. Excellent. We'll put this aside. I'm going to work on this board. So our 6300309 board from 1990. We have our 68020 processor, our ROMs, our PDS slot with some dust in it, our VRAM, our SIMs, floppy port, SCSI port, and up here, of course, we have all the capacitors that we're going to need to replace. So I've rotated the board so that the caps are closest to me. We're going to take a picture of the capacitor layout. With the majority of them over here, 3 additional over at the edge of the board here. Now everyone's got an opinion about removing capacitors from an SMD board. They're all wrong. And if you want to judge me, feel free. On the other hand, it's a Macintosh LC. And most people who care about these, it's for, well, let's be fair, it's nostalgia, and that's about it. So, I'm going to grip capacitor, press down, and twist. Comes right off. We live to do it again. Press down, twist. So we have some debris left. Try to get some of the edges here. So let's take a look, see where we're at here. On the board here, you can actually start to see a little bit of the cap juice damage. We see some corrosion here on a few of the capacitors. The pads definitely have some issues here. Look particularly at C6. You can see some of it at C4 where there was some obvious leakage. Now, some of these can be from capacitors popping when twisting, and you can see some fresh liquid, for instance at C5. But some of this has been here for some time. Come over here to C13 and C14, and it becomes painfully obvious how this is going here. So I am going to take some IPA and clean some of this up before taking a soldering iron and some wick and cleaning up some of this mess. By no means is this perfect, but it's a lot better. The juice came off for the most part. We can still see some issues around some of the capacitors, which we're going to deal with in a little bit. The main goal here was to get the majority of this juice off, so I'm not burning that up with the soldering iron when we take off the legs. And, in case you're wondering, there's our pile of garbage. As things have gotten a little long here, this is going to close out part 1. So in the next part, we're going to get these new tantalum capacitors on the board and hopefully get this machine booting and see what's on it. See you next time.